When we start. All right, brilliant. Great. Precious, Kalalelo, Penny, you can switch your cameras off. And we can get started. Okay, thank you. Awesome. Okay, great. Thank you for everyone who's joined today. I know that there's going to be a few others that join along this morning. Today is an ESO session, focused session, and on an overview of how to set up ESOs and information about ESOs in general. We have with us today Josh Choi, who's joined us from South Korea. Just to give you some insight into Josh. Josh, if you could put your camera on so we can see you as well, that'd be great. Josh is a key figure in the Korea startup ecosystem. He is known for his extensive experience in both the private and public sectors. So he's got experience on both sides, which is a super important part when setting up ESOs and programs, knowing both sides of the coin. As the business strategy director of Korea Startup Forum, which is the largest startup membership organization in Korea with over 2,100 members, Josh is key and pivotal in fostering dynamic startup community relationships. Josh's role includes organizing major events like Come Up Korea, which is Asia's largest global startup festival. And he oversees that as the executive director, which is the program that we will end up with our leading top 20 startups and tech ventures at the end of the year, which is an opportunity for ESOs to be involved in as well. So Josh will let us know a bit about that. And he is actively involved in global startup initiatives as well. So he leads the AI for Good Innovation Factory and mentors startups worldwide, particularly through Korean government programs aimed at supporting innovation in developing countries. So it's great to have Josh on with us today. To really give us some great oversight and overview of ESOs and how they've developed over the last few years. So, Josh, thanks for joining us today. Please, can you share your slides when you're ready, and I'm going to hand over to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rex, for a kind introduction to me. Firstly, I'd like to apologize for my terrible voice because I got a COVID, but I can manage my presentation. And it's a really great honor of me to be here to share my experiences and also share my thoughts. I think the session on the ESOs, probably the people who are in the Zoom call maybe a better expert in this area. So I don't think I'm really in a perfect position to do some kind of lecture to someone else. Rather, I'm here to share some of my thoughts and then have a really deep discussions on strategy and vision for ESOs globally, also in your local setting. So let me share my screen today here. All right. Okay. I hope it's working.
Yes, thanks, Josh. It's looking good. We can see it. Carry on.
All right. Okay. All right. So firstly, I'd like to go through some kind of evolution of especially a VC perspective. Perhaps you guys can ask question whether the ESO is the same as the VC. Of course, maybe not. But I mean, ESO is a really huge concept on any entity who can actually support entrepreneurship development, and also actually the evolution and the development of the venture capital is really influencing on forming a different type of entrepreneurship support and development areas. So I think it's a very important to start from evolution of the venture capital, which also will lead to current status in environment in startup ecosystem. So this is why I would like to touch upon the original story of the VCs, and then how actually the venture funding has been evolved, and then what are what would be the implications of all these stories. You might heard about, Traitorous 8, who are basically actually the employees of, Shockley Semiconductor in 1950s. Basically, William Shockley was the Nobel Prize winner. He was a really great genius, physicist and a great person, but his temper and then his management style was really, really hard to work with. And those, the PhD students, and then they really didn't want to work anymore with, Dr. Shockley, and then they decided to form their own company. But I mean, they are the all really technology expert, and they didn't know actually how to actually build a business. And then they really wanted to really, achieve their dream, especially in semiconductor industry, which was a really big promising area for the economic growth that time in the United States. And the legacy of this Fairchild semiconductors led to the birth of Intel, AMD, Apple, all these things. And some of these people, founded Intel, also engaged in the birth of AMD, and there are a lot of legacy here. And so when they actually came out from the Shockley semiconductor, they founded a new semiconductor company in 1956. And that time, and they met, the Arthur Rock, who is actually known as the father of venture capitalists. So basically, he said, these people, by their resumes, they were super superior people. And he believed that there's something here, there's something more valuable than just being an employee. And he thought, these people deserve more compensation rather than just being paid. So this is actually really the, birth of venture capital. And before that, previously, and the traditional financial service is more about loans, and they always ask for deposit. I didn't actually invest in any ideal technology. So Arthur was the really first person who actually made investment in this kind of innovative technology company. And then, well, he actually created a new way of financing, which is basically equity funding. So this is the birth of venture capital funding. And 1960s, and Don Valentine, who was former employee of Fairchild Semiconductor, he founded Sequoia Capital, which is now one of the oldest, the biggest venture capital in the world. And then further to Arthur Rock's approach, and he applied hands-on activism to the venture capital playbook, which means that not just investing in company, but also VC started to be engaged, involved in decision making of the company, who to hire as a CEO, and when they exit, and how to actually make money, and etc. etc. So basically, the venture capital list actually, get more and more engaged in the management of the company, and also they started to ask for a seat in a board as a board member. And then also, in order to make the company they invested grow, they started to thinking about stage by stage gradualism, funding. So basically, Series A, Series B, those kind of concept was actually initiated by Don Valentine a long time ago. And 1960s, and those trends, as I mentioned just before, in the venture capital, and also activism kept going in 1970s. And then in Silicon Valley, there were quite a lot of venture capital people, and then there was some kind of venture network. Especially Apple's story is really highlighted the importance of venture network, because when actually Steve Jobs approached the first investors, he rejected, but he introduced someone else, but he also rejected, but he introduced someone else, and then actually keeps going on, and finally, and Apple was able to get a lot of funding from the different venture capitalists. So basically, venture network really works as well. So previously, mostly venture capital invested in one company, one venture capitalist, one company. But from this time on, and then multiple number of venture capitalists actually was started to invest together in a company. And Arthur Peterson and Jim Swanson, who founded Accel Capital, they started a new type of venture capital, which basically the first venture fund that specialized in particular fields. So previously, in most venture capital, they made just a really general approach to invest in any promising startups, regardless of field or something. But they were really expertised in a specific field, for example, software and telecoms, and they invested only in those sector companies. So this approach also challenged the generalist approach adopted by traditional VCs, and then there were lots of this kind of VCs was expertised in the field, because without expertise in a specific field, sometimes the VCs actually they are not expertise in a certain specific field, and then but in this case actually they don't exactly understand the core value of this business. So this type of expertise VCs was able to measure how innovative the technology itself. And the 1990s also, there was a very interesting phenomenon at the time, because actually it was the boom of the internet, and the Yahoo was the really first frontier at that time as an internet portal site. And then the Yahoo was seen as a really innovative service, but in order to dominate the market in the internet service at that time, actually they had to reinvest revenue into marketing expenditure to grow. So a lot of VCs also saw Yahoo as a really cash burning business, but in order to raise the value of this company, they kept investing more and more and more. And so actually this trend led to introduction of the growth investment. So what I mean by this growth investment sentence is exponential growth. So basically all these VCs who really wanted to see exponential growth, and Masayoshi Son from SoftBank, and he invested in like a few $100 million or something, which was not very ordinary at that time. Normally at that time, VCs actually split their risk by investing different multiple portfolio. But actually, Masayoshi Son invested a lot of money only on Yahoo, and only on really big potential company, and then that really made a huge sum of return later on. And the trend actually kept going on. And then after Yahoo and the Google came out, and but interestingly, it was a kind of a first time that we found the angel investing. So the Andy, the Bachelor's Chain, he co-founded Sun Microsoft, and then Andy, and he even didn't ask many questions or analyze the business potential of Google, and he just wrote a check of 100,000 payable dollars to Google Incorporated. But that time, even Larry Page and Sergey Brin, and they actually hadn't incorporated company yet. So this was a really burst of angel investing. And then, so actually angel investing came out, and then a lot of really big people who make a lot of return after investing in some companies, and then they prefer to have some kind of small amount of angel investing to their really young, genius people with a great idea. But interestingly, since the Google deal, the balance of power between entrepreneurs and VCs had shifted. Previously, actually, VC has the bigger power in terms of the management, and so they have the voting power in the board committee, and also they always ask the founder to hire the CEO, because most of these tech company was founded by technologists, and the VCs was not sure how well they actually do their business as a businessman. And then, but Larry Page and Sergey, and they didn't want to do that. So since then, actually, the startups make a bigger voice, and then they didn't want to change the CEO. They want to keep their power and the control. So this is why these two guys keep their position as the founder and CEO for a long time before they adopt Eric Schmidt as a CEO later on. And then early 2000, and then that trend also kept going, especially Mark Zuckerberg, founder of Facebook, and he actually didn't want any fund from the major venture capitalists in order to avoid their too much interference. So basically, the Mark actually sought the private angel investors after rejecting all different offers from Google, Benchmark Capital, and Sequoia Capital. And then he met Peter Thiel, who is the founder of PayPal. And then Peter actually angel invested $500K for 10% of the stake of the Facebook. And Reid Hoffman, who is the founder of LinkedIn also, he is the person actually introduced, Peter Thiel to Mark Zuckerberg, and he also invested nearly 40K US dollars there. So, and since then, the tech startup founders and so they're getting more and bigger voice, and then these angel investors adopted a hands-off approach, which means that they allow the Facebook team to work independently without any big interference. Some angel investors, they didn't ask for a seat in the board's committee, and then actually since then the founders can actually lead their company more by their own and for themselves. And we also found very interesting trends also in early 2000 because so far and the venture capital as actually the industry is just getting bigger and bigger, and tech firms valuation is also getting bigger and bigger. But actually the program, who is the founder of the Y Combinator, looked at the totally different opportunity by identifying really big entrepreneur with a big potential, with a very great idea, even if it is really, really early stage. So especially he created a batch-based seed investments. So every year he created some kind of cohort. Actually, Y Combinator model is now the really benchmark for all type of accelerator every year. So with a little bit of exaggeration, I would say most of accelerators around the world basically adopted the model from Y Combinator, even they actually copied all these things. So basically, he was a very unique creator of the new model. So in 2005 program, he co-founded the Summer Founders program after he giving a lecture in the Stanford University with his girlfriend and also two of his VIA co-founders. And this program was evolved into Y Combinator. And so year 2005, they selected 20 very early stage startups from more than 200 applications. Of course, these days, I mean, they've got more than thousands of applicants every year. And then they invested just a small amount of money, so $6,000 for a 6% equity stake in each startup. It's a very small investment, but quite a lot of actually equity, funding. And among them, we can find Sam Altman, Elon Musk, and also co-founder of Reddit, Hoffman and Wanian. So even Y Combinator model is really high risk because you never know whether actually your selected startups will go really well or not. But I mean, it also gives also completely different model for startups in that time. And then through the 2010s, also we witnessed the rise of growth equity, which was driven by major investments in tech giants. So basically at that time, Facebook actually didn't want to raise funds anymore from venture capitalists because they thought a social media market was saturated. But actually a Russian guy, Yuri Milner, actually who hasn't any big presence in Silicon Valley, he saw the potential of Facebook's global expansion because he already invested in several copycat services in Russia and some other countries, and then he made a lot of money from all this investing. So there was Facebook type social media service in Russia. There was Airbnb in Russia. There was an Uber in Russia, etc. But I mean, Facebook type social media was still a lot of potential in all different emerging economy. So Yuri Miller approached Mark Zuckerberg, and then firstly they actually rejected, but I mean he kept contacting again, and then he showed the all potential financial gain data and everything. He finally agreed to get the fund from Yuri Miller, and then even you remember he even didn't ask for any seat in the board meeting. And then Yuri Miller's, another portfolio company, and then Yuri Miller asked this company to buy some stocks from Mark Zuckerberg and employees. So even Yuri also was able to give financial freedom to those people who own stock options. So there was a lot of interesting, innovative, way of using, this, basic financial mechanism to make everybody happy at the time. So this of that strategy means, like as I mentioned, Airbnb in Russia, like the Facebook in, India, this kind of thing. So Tiger Global, they actually invested in, for example, Chinese version of Uber, Chinese version of Amazon. So it actually enabled them to, invest in globally. And then recently, we also saw very interesting trends. So Magnus in the Greenland, who is the founder of Antler, he even go into further into really early stage, entrepreneurs. So he is positioned himself as the leader of a company builder. So instead of investing in promising startups, actually the Antler recruit future unicorn founders even without any business model. And then they help connect them to form a great team. Okay, so you are a really good professional background in finance. So you can be a CFO. Okay, so you are a great background in marketing. You can be a CMO. Oh, this guy is really, this guy's from management consulting service company or something. So they try to form a team of 3 or 4 people. And then they provide some kind of subsidy for just a few months, 3 months or something. And then during these 3 months, they mentor and then they provide consulting. And this group of 3 people come up with a concrete business idea. Then they open a demo day, invite all early stage investors. And finally, this team was able to get the fund, not only from Antler, but also from other early stage startups. So, actually previously, VC is always looking for the promising startups in cooperatives. But this model actually investing in people. So, I mean, now the actual venture capital mechanism is really wide from the really pre-entrepreneur to really big tech companies. All right. So now, all these VCs and accelerators and, company builders, angel investors, CVCs, all different type of actually, investment-based ESOs or able to be born because of all this evolution of VCs. But also these days, even the law firms and government, founders community, consulting firm, all these other ESOs also join this startup ecosystem. But I think all these things was able to happen because of all this evolution of VCs. So this ecosystem of investors, innovators has not only enabled startups to access a broad range of funding options, but also actually, this ecosystem actually fosters supportive environment for entrepreneurs to grow their business. So far we've just looked through how venture capital, how venture funding has been evolved, and then as I mentioned, thanks to this evolution, and then we come up with the various type of ESOs as well, even without any funding engagement. And then I would like to deep dive into the world of the ESOs and then how we can actually strengthen the power of ESO to support environment, support entrepreneurs' development. All right. So as I mentioned, this investment based in the ESOs like the VCs and accelerators and CVCs and then angel investors, even company builders like Antler, they also do mentoring. They also do business consulting. They also do accelerating. They also facilitate partnership and also even they invest it. But non-investment based ESOs, for example, like consulting firm, like an agency, associations, founder community. Also, they do a lot of program about mentoring, consulting, accelerating, facilitating, but they don't invest directly in startups. So there is some kind of challenge that we can find because these VCs also play a role as a ESO, but also they invest in. But from start's point, they always look for funds to scale up their business, but also after securing fund from VC accelerators, also they got the service for all these different type of service or sometimes for free. So there's a challenge, I think. All this, the investment, based the ESOs, they provide mentoring, consulting, also in the partnership facilitation services. But this is not a service. This is also another type of investment from venture capital. So also, if venture capital wants to get financial gain, they definitely need their portfolio companies to grow. So the reason why they are engaged in all these mentoring consulting services is to make their startups grow so that they can make a financial gain. So it's really naturally, or should say it, related. So their need to make a lot of money by investing in really promising startups and also foster innovation is very closely related with their mentoring service. So it's another type of investment again. But I mean, the non-investment based ESOs, basically they provide mentor consulting, but this is a service, whether they actually charge startups or whether they charge someone else, whatever, this is a service that also needs some kind of charge. I think there's an interesting challenge here for especially non-investment based ESOs here. So I was just looking at some of the business model of kind of the non-investment based ESOs here and how to survive them. So basically, yes, service fee is one of the way that the ESOs are making money. So for example, they create a lot of interesting consulting service and mentoring service. So this service fee can charges startups directly, or sometimes some consulting company actually helps startup make a pitch deck, and then once a startup actually secure a fund, and the certain percent of the total fund given to the ESOs as a fee. So in this case, they don't directly charge startups, but once a startup, I mean their client subsidy funding, and then they get a fee. I saw several models, especially here in Asian market, also in the Europe and the US, but I mean, it's not a very widely spread model. And then also there are some kind of turnkey project. So for example, or government or big companies, and they don't have an expert in the startup ecosystem. So they ask ESOs to lead some kind of project as a turnkey project, and then they can actually make some kind of overhead, profit from this, project funding. Then, of course, there are some ESOs can, build some kind of membership service so that they can make some kind of membership fee as a revenue, but also they provide some kind of membership service. And some ESOs also do some kind of business on certification, especially in South Korea. We have a certificate for innovative, venture company or something. So you have to reach it to certain criteria. And then if you got this certificate, and then you will have more plus, score when you apply for any R&D support project, or if you got this certificate and then you got a advantage, demo day or something. So mostly this kind of certificate should be issued by a really credible organization, mostly in the government. So these are major, some business models for, especially non-investment based, ESOs. But also always, there is a challenging question whether all these models really make my organization grow sustainably. So I was thinking about some of the strategies that we can think about, especially for ESOs who are not engaged in financial investment. This is some of my idea. Of course, I'm very open to debate and open discussion with you guys today here. And as I mentioned, the investment based in the ESOs, they invest in the startups. However, especially in an environment where venture capital is not easily available, entrepreneurs, startups should be able to have the capacity to bootstrap without any funding. So in this kind of environment, yes, I think there is an opportunity. And then also I think would it be also interesting to build a unique community, especially community of founders, because I believe the best way for entrepreneurs to grow is to learn from also other entrepreneurs. So a lot of mentoring, consulting services from the VCs, accelerator incubators are actually done by investors and accelerator. But I have seen many, many cases that these people actually have never founded a startup. So the other day, I read a very interesting article written by the Khosla, who actually was the co-founder of Sun Microsystems. And he's one of the big, the venture capitalists in the US. The Vinod Vinod Khosla, he said, and the VCs actually their mentoring actually doesn't work, and then actually they have never founded the startup. Actually, how can they actually mentor startups founders? So, I mean, yeah, it would be interesting to facilitate the network between entrepreneurs so that entrepreneurs can nurture, other entrepreneurs so that we can, build a virtuous circle. And also, I think it is important to strengthen relationship with government international organizations. I'm going to touch upon this later in my slide. So I just mentioned about the possibility and opportunity in an environment where venture capital is now widely available, especially because an entrepreneur should build their capacity to bootstrap, and then maybe and there is an opportunity because the venture capitals their functions and then non-investment based in the ESOs, the function will be the same because the investment is gone. So I'm not sure if it's really luck or bad luck, but I mean, the overall global economy, if the global economic downturn is driving the shift of entrepreneurship skills, especially in an environment where venture capital was really widely available. So previously, in a lot of people actually, a lot of mentoring was focused on building fundraising skills, like how to upgrade your IR deck and how to actually convince your VCs. But now, again, the venture capital, industry is getting frozen because of economic downturn again. And then now, actually, the founders, they are more asked to build their more cost-saving skills rather than really fundraising skills. And also, previously, the startups were asked to focus on traction itself, regardless of actual revenue, but now they have to focus on revenue. And also previously, they more focus on user acquisition. And once you have the huge pool of customers, then they believe they could build a business model by utilizing this, pool of customers. But I mean now, that startups should have more focus on user retentions and then how to actually keep, making money. And then, well, when the VCs were very popular and the VC fund was very much available and the platform business were very much welcomed because it's much easier to build a startup and they just connect, two sides, supply and demand. But these days, I can see the trend and there are more and more tech product startups are more welcomed even by the investors because they have a concrete product, they have the concrete technology, which also can be applied globally. So these trends and then is something that we can take into account on how to actually strategize the way of ESOs in the current situation. And also, as I mentioned, so building a unique community will be interesting option. So I'd like to share some examples in South Korea here. So Korea Startup Forum is actually a place that I'm working for, but I mean, it's a very unique community. So more than 2,000 startup members join this community, but actually this is a community of founders. So we embed paid forward culture in community. So established startup founders, they actually help nurture early stage entrepreneurs. So instead of directly engaging in mentoring or consulting program, and we actively engage startup founders to join this program so that startup founders share their knowledge and then they are engaged in training and workshops and everything. So and this is a really paid forward culture. So that and then sometimes it really happens that this established startup founders actually invest in early startup later on once this early startup has grown up to the certain level. And hands-on mentoring by entrepreneurs. So as I mentioned, all programs are run by entrepreneurs. And then last part is also very important. As a community of startup founders, we position ourselves as a strong counterpart, especially for the policy lawmakers. So whenever the government puts a new policy and a new program, they always ask advice from us, from Korea Startup Forum, and then actually startup founders are directly engaged in the process of decision and lawmaking. And so basically, this is a lot of value that we can create. And then thanks to these values and startup founders, once they are grown up through the help of all these, entrepreneur numbers, and they paid forward. So they actually donate and contribute to Korea Startup Forum. So we really build a virtual circle here. And then I mentioned it's important to strengthen relationship with the government because the government also is very important ESOs. So I think that we have to make a voice against the government to try to do something in a more transformative, innovative way. And South Korea has the ministry dedicated to SMEs and startups. This makes a huge difference because I saw a lot of organizational chart in a different government or different countries. Mostly startup issue is managed by the industry of innovation, like Ministry of Science, ICT, innovation, transportation, or something, and then they have the part Department of SM and Startup. Actually, this structure doesn't give a really strong, environment, doesn't make a really strong environment, a supportive environment for startup founders. So South Korean government decided to create a ministry fully dedicated to SMEs and startups, and then their annual budget is 10 billion US dollars, which is fully used for different startup supportive, program. And then what the ministry is doing is not just to design, run the program by themselves, but the government understand actually they are not experts. And so they really well designed public-private partnerships. So for example, fund of funds. So the ministry actually form a fund, and then they work as an LP, and then they allocate fund to GP, so that the GP is actually investing in the startup. And also TIPS program is the program for the early stage startups. So if an early stage startup can raise the 100K US dollars from early stage startup accelerator, and they can apply for TIPS program. Once they approve, and then the government put the match funding maximum 500K US dollars. So it's a really win-win program because accelerators, and then they can just invest in small amount of money, and then they can get also benefits from the government support, and also the startups get the additional funding, and the government just leave the private sector actually move on for the innovation. And then also the government also exporting entrepreneurship development initiatives. So for example, we have a Youth Startup Academy, which is initiated by the government, but also run by private sector. So they actually started export this program to Uganda and Colombia. So I think it is important for government policymakers to think about, creating the ministry dedicated to startups, and then think about the public-private partnership models. And so the reason I'm talking about ODA is that these days I've been involved in many ODA projects, touching upon startup and the entrepreneurship development, because so far, traditionally ODA is spent on this area like social infrastructure, like production sectors, also like environment, urban, building infrastructure, building schools, and the nutrition, children issues. And then, entrepreneurship development was some kind of really multi-sectoral issues. So if there is a right for especially government from developing country ask for OECD, some other ODA organizations, and identify what kind of project that we need fund. And then I think there are a lot of developing country government should be able to ask for more ODA fund for entrepreneurship development. And then there are lots of, the huge fund is formed globally in ODA. And if the entrepreneurship development area can take at least a few percentage of this total funding, and then the government and international organization will play and can play a significant role, but also the ESOs in developing countries can be a really good partner for them, and then we can really grow the overall startup entrepreneurship ecosystem. So a little bit of a recap here. The venture capital industry has been playing a crucial role in shaping the innovation landscape around the world, but this is expansion and evaluation of the VC's role can pose a challenging question for the non-investment based ESOs, because actually they also do the similar functions, but the opportunities for non-investment based ESOs could be found in an environment where the venture funding is not widely available, and also there is an opportunity as a way to build a virtuous circle of entrepreneurship development through a founder-oriented approach. And the more ODA funds should be allocated to the entrepreneurship development, and the government and international organizations will be a key partner for the ESOs, particularly from developing countries. So this is the end of my presentation, and then I'm very open to the questions. Thank you very much for your attention. And
Awesome.
sorry again
Thanks,
for
Josh.
my bad voice. Sorry.
No, it was fine. We could hear you clearly. It was good. Josh, we do have one question here from Raphael. He says, thanks, Josh Choi, for the insightful presentation. He said, I like the story of YC and its exponential growth over the years. Can you expand on these pioneer ESOs, how they overcame growth challenges or any lessons learned?
Yeah, well, it's very important and also very challenging questions, right? Yeah. So well, basically, I think I don't know what kind of challenges that actually Rafael is thinking about, but there must be a lot of challenges for this kind of really young, this type of the pioneer really young ESOs, because pretty much the market in some areas the market is saturated. There are a lot of competitors there, right? So considering that kind of challenge of high competition, firstly, I think these ESOs should be equipped with a really venture mindset. I mean, because I saw a lot of ESOs, they really too much make an approach as a service provider. But I mean, basically all these ESOs have to be, have to make a really founder-focused approach. So they really have to think about the business model by themselves. And then also they have to take more higher risk, because basically this is also venture business as well. So you have to really higher risk, which means that you have to build your skills to identify really big early stage startup with a really big potential. So in order to do that, you have to learn, you have to study a lot, and which area that we really have to look for, especially in terms of innovation ecosystem. So I think as a really pioneer ESOs, firstly, yeah, you really have to build up your skills, but also you have to gather like-minded people, and then you have to form a really great team. It's similar to the actually, advice for the early stage startup, thing, I believe.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Just a reminder for everyone to just if you've got any questions, you can also put your hand up, and I'm going to open it so we can you can actually unmute yourselves and start your videos and ask your questions. Josh, from my side, just a question while people are doing that. Can you give an example of some really great ESOs in Korea at the moment that really are you see have done some amazing jobs that people should have a look at?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that question. Yeah. There are several types of ESO. Okay, well, I'm going to separate like the VC accelerator incubators. Basically, they're then available everywhere, and then especially in this special context. Yeah, in addition to Korea Startup Forum, there is also a several association of like the women startup founders. And if you look at the startup scene, and then you will see the big gender gap. And then even in Korea, I think around 10% of the startup founders, only 10% of the startup founders is women.
Yeah.
And so basically, in order to overcome this disadvantage, association of the female startup founders, they have really great programs that run. Also very much welcome the also female founders. And also we have the Association of Female Investors. I think that's very important. Even the investment area, I think that 7% of the actually VCs are women. But I mean, interestingly, in terms of the performance, actually, female investors have the much higher performance in terms of return and everything. So they also run very also interesting program to share how normal VCs can apply this female specific approach to their work. And then also we have the entrepreneur support organization, which is now really big. They started as a small group of people, but I mean when they as time went on, they grow up, and then they finally succeeded funding from the government, and then they actually use huge amount of yearly budget, and then they run lot of program. So, but difference between Korea Startup Forum and this Korea Entrepreneurship Support Organization is that sometimes we, Korea Startup Forum, have to fight against the government because we have to change the law. So this is why we don't get funds from the government. But sometimes some organizations really need funds from government, international organizations, so they have the different paths. So these are several examples that I can think of.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Josh. Donna, I see you have got your hand up. Please, you can put your camera on and your mic on, and you can ask.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much. My name is Donna Sava from Hive Collab. So I just wanted to first of all thank you for the presentation, and then maybe just make a contribution, but also a question. The contribution, first with the contribution on the ecosystem. When you mentioned the startup ecosystem, what is comprised of, I realized you missed the researchers or the institutions, that the teaching institutions. I think those are also very key. They're part of the ecosystem. They do complement the ecosystem. As we all know, research feeds into the innovation. Yeah, so that's just a comment on that. Then when my question is now onto the fund, the startup fund that you are able to set up. I've been to actually Korea. I've been privileged to be part of the team that visited last year during the come up. And at Hive Collab, we do host actually the Youth Startup Academy in Uganda. So I know it's a replica of that one in South Korea, because that's where it stems from. But I just wanted to find out the startup fund. how does it work, and how were you able to, convince that? Because I know it's made up of the private sector. It's a private sector that actually feeds into the startup fund. And I'm just wondering, how were you able to convince the private sector to feed into this fund? And then after feeding into the fund and you have the fund in place, then how does it then work to go to the startups? How do the private sector then benefit from the fund? The investors, how do they benefit from the fund? Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, just clarify your question. You mean, what you mean? Do you mean by the fund is fund from, the ODA fund, or what fund did you mention?
I talked about the startup fund. So you have a fund that you give to your startups. There are different funds, definitely, but there's a fund where the individuals or private investors or angel investors, where they invest their money into. Yeah. And then that fund is where also startups start to receive some funding from. So I'm wondering, how were you able to convince these angel investors to come together and invest into this fund? Because here where we are in Uganda, I mean, we don't really have actual angel investors. We have an association which we call the CANE, which is Kampala Angel Investors Network, but it doesn't really actually exist. It is barely there. So basically, because we have failed to convince the different individuals to invest. So just trying to understand, how were you able to convince? Was there a law? Is it, was it just goodwill? How were these individuals, the different angel investors, able to, put funds into this fund? And then how does it work? How do they benefit from the fund besides the startups themselves?
Yeah, basically, that's always a challenging question for the general partners VCs, because in the VCs also have to convince limited partners who actually give the money, and then they actually operate the fund in the startup, right? So basically, firstly, you have to convince any person who got the money, hey guys, this is a really good, a fund, this is a really good, investment, product, and you have to, invest it, right? Yeah. So, but I mean, there's no really shortcut, there's no really, standard answers to all these things. But if we look at all the history of successful funding from the evolution of the VCs and also current status there. So basically, if you really want to convince these private sectors to put the money in the startup, is that you have to, but firstly, basically, you have to show your capacity, and then, so I know very well of this innovation ecosystem. I know really these, innovative startups, and their technology is promising. I've got data, so basically also you definitely need a really concrete data on, how many startups are doing how many really great jobs, what kind of technologies that are really well received what are the actual future prediction of your fund, in terms of the financial return. So basically, I think that you have to be able to convince those people with the really concrete idea and data and information about the startup scene in your region. And I think, well, I don't know, maybe in Ugandan context, maybe there are some more things, but I mean, there are some very different ways. Sometimes it's true. Sometimes, you just convince those people in a really emotional, approach, and sometimes it works. And sometimes, they give a really big, hype, rather than really data. So it really varies. But in generally speaking, generally speaking, from my witness to the older, VCs are looking for, money to fund in the startup scene, and they really concretely prepared all the data information about innovation, and then they really convince their capability, capacity to make money for those funders. I think Rafael raised their hand. Yeah.
Yeah. Rafael, last question from you, and then we'll close off. You're welcome to put your camera on, and please do, and your mic, and ask the question.
You can see me?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh, for the presentation. My my question is not very different from what Donna just asked, but for the interest of maybe getting a clear clarification or borrowing from the experiences that you have in South Korea. I know here in Kenya, our government is approaching PPP approach. That's public-private partnership. And I think it's something that is really being embraced. And I see most of the corporates are coming into even supporting entrepreneurs through initiatives that are more than what we call the social community social responsibility, CSR. But they are investing into startups. A case example is the telco giant, the Safaricom, and even the leading commercial banks in Kenya. They are investing into startups and kind of accelerating the growth of these enterprises. So maybe from the experiences in South Korea, how has this PPP worked, and do you see us succeeding as Africa going that direction? Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah. Well, I mean, and that's a really interesting, also really complicated, question, because every country has different level of engagement from the government in the private market, right? So, for example, in the US, actually, the government doesn't really play any really significant role in forming venture capital or whatever. Actually, they leave them to do that. And China has a super strong control, and that they control everything. And I think South Korea in the somewhere in the middle, right? So, so it really depends on the government stance and the government will and their vision. So basically, the basic stance of the Korean government is to, okay, they make a stage, and then they just invite all the private sectors, and then they make all these private sectors and the main actor. So they are basically infrastructure provider. So I think this is really, really important, because sometimes the government wants to be engaging too much in there, that they wanted to have a direct control. They wanted to have really, direct control all the budget and everything. So in South Korean case here, the government, as I mentioned, they form a fund. So actually they get the fund from different ministries, and then they form a fund of funds, and then they make a RFP to all the venture capitalists. And then they have a very fair selection process, and then they give the money, and then they just let the VCs and then invest in a really innovative startups. Interestingly, this fund of funds return rate is really high. So actually, the ministry makes a lot of money by investing as a limited partner to VCs. So again, in order to make the really successful case, firstly, the government should be able to give more freedom to private sector, and the private sector should be a really high expert in an area. And so we really have to create an environment where these all different counterparts trust, at the same time also have control to each other, so that we can have enough level of tension, enough level of trust. I think this balance is very, very important to make the successful PPP, especially in the startup scene, I believe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much, Josh. That was some awesome insight in there. I'm sure all the ESOs that have joined today have had a lot of stuff that they can chew on and get involved in. So it's really interesting. So thanks for your time today, and thanks everyone for joining. Raphael and Donna, thank you so much for your questions. Great to have that feedback from your side. We're going to sign off now. But yeah, please don't hesitate to contact us if you're looking for more information or opportunities as well. We will be out in Korea later on in the year with Josh, and he's going to take us all around. But yeah, all good. Thank you very much. And that's Josh's details at the end.